Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night from wherever you're listening. Today we are joined by the very special guest, Era Shah. I'll let Era introduce herself in a moment. So we're very happy to be collaborating with Era for Women in Engineering with the purpose to raise the profile of women in engineering, but also to shift the focus back on the amazing career opportunities available to girls. So without saying much more, I'll let Era take it away. So Era, if you can just start by introducing yourself and just talking a bit more about your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Anytime.
I'm a chartered civil engineer, and I'm currently seconded into a planning engineer role on the Thames Tideway East project.
Mhm.
Um, the role of a planning engineer is basically to support the team in building a construction sequence for their site, looking out at where the activities can be done concurrently, if we're on track, sort of working through different scenarios and basically seeing if we're on the sort of what the critical path is for the final completion date. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. But in terms of, looking way back into when I first thought of getting into engineering or how that even happened,
Mhm.
I absolutely loved design technology when I was at school. And it was actually my design technology teacher who recommended I explore engineering as a possible career path. I think he could just tell that I enjoyed being a bit creative and understanding how things are built.
Mhm.
I'd actually never considered engineering before that, nor did my parents, to be honest. I'm from a South Asian family, so typically the boys went into engineering and more IT based. So anything else really never occurred to me as an option. But when I was at GCSE level, my teacher recommended I apply for the Arkwright Engineering Scholarship, which is an initiative where you are afforded an industry mentor and a sponsor from across a range of sort of sectors. So, marine, civil, aerospace. Um, and you are able to then, learn more about the industry and what it has to offer, which was really great. So I was successful in applying for the scholarship,
Mhm.
which was a huge confidence boost in the first place. It's you almost find like, oh, actually, there's something I could be really good at in the future. So that's really cool. And then as part of sort of that work experience they provide, I got to shadow a structural engineer um, in the summer. And not only was she a female engineer, but she owned her own business and she'd led on some really iconic, yeah, exactly, iconic designs in London, such as the London Eye and
Wow.
the treetop structure in Kew Garden. So yeah, exactly. Wow, it was really inspirational as a 17-year-old to see that, and I just really liked what she could get involved in. So that was my first sort of uh, I guess exposure to civil engineering. And then it was oddly enough through one of the networking events that Arkwright had organised, I met a representative from Costain,
Mhm.
which is the company that I work for now. And I actually, spoke to them. They gave me some work experience, and through, a lot of perseverance, I eventually secured full university sponsorship and paid summer placements
Mhm.
for my 4-year civil engineering master's degree at Nottingham University. So that's kind of what threw me straight into civil engineering from the get-go.
Mhm. Wow. You've done some bits to get to where you are now. Uh, would you say that there'd been like a most valuable part of this journey? So would it have been the graduate scheme? Would it have been the mentorship? Would it have been the sponsorship? Or would you say it's just a combination of all of the above, really?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a combination, but every step is you build more and more confidence and more of an understanding of what you like and what you don't like, and it really helps you to focus your attention onto where you want to go. Obviously,
Yeah.
nothing's permanent. You can always change, where you decide to sort of draw your attention on, but for me, it helped kind of build those stepping stones to gain more and more confidence in my ability as an engineer. So yeah, it was a bit of everything. You do need mentors to sort of talk you through things and give you that assurance. You need sponsorship was brilliant because yeah, they were able to introduce to other projects in the summer. So I was able to build my network very, very early. and have exposure to different projects that I could get involved in. And yeah, it as a combination, it's great, but everything was through sort of really being persistent. I think, don't take for granted the contacts that you build and think you can't ask ask more questions, you can't ask work experience and all that. Everyone's really happy to help from my experience, so definitely go for it.
Definitely. Awesome. How many years within the industry are you now? Sorry if you don't mind me asking.
So 8 years in August.
8.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what would you say your most proudest moments or achievements are so far within your career, and why?
Yeah, so for me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is being listed in The Guardian as the top 50 women in engineering by the Women in Engineering Society. So that was last year in 2021. And that was based on my work as an engineer on the HS2 Enabling Works South contract. And also for being one of the founding members of a women's network whilst I was on that project. It's very much a shared award that I hold very proudly with the teams that were involved in that whole process. But that project really came to a good head for me, because I felt like I was in a position where I could lead a team. All my experience up until then had sort of come together, and I had a lot of self-confidence in actually helping to deliver that package. So it's really nice to have that all wrapped up in an award, and it gives me opportunity to sort of talk about it as well, and highlight that success. But also the engineers that were in my team, that they're doing really well. They've had their own successes, so it's really nice to know that I've been part of that development, and just really rewarding that that they'll sometimes they'll give me a ring and see if what they can do next or where should they go. So that's really nice. But also generally, I think in civil engineering in particular, and I suppose other engineering aspects, but the most recent sort of proud moment was the opening of the Elizabeth line. I worked on the Paddington Crossrail station when I was a site engineer, so being able to take my family down to the station and say, this is what I was part of. I was a site engineer, I was working on the platform, sort of RC works and things like that. That's also really cool. So a few proud moments.
I bet that was awesome, being able to take your family to where you work and explain.
Yeah, and Paddington organised a family day when we were during construction, so they did actually get to come and see it when it was all just this concrete frame structure that we were working on. So it's nice for them to also see how it kind of grows into this beautiful station that the public can use.
That's really, really cool. So for the Women in Engineering this year, the theme is Inventor, or Innovator, whose drives change. Which would you say you are out of the two, or both, and why?
That's a good question. I'd say if I'd had to choose, I'd say I was more on the innovator side of things. I think I don't think I'm as creative enough to just come up with new things and invent new things, but I do love speaking to people and learning what new techniques are out there, whether they're construction techniques or processes, and understanding if what the purpose of that solution is and how the product can work, I suppose, in a scenario that I might be working on or in a project that I'm working on. So I think it's really fun to be able to stretch an idea and draw on all its opportunities. And an example, I guess, of that was whilst I was on the HS2 project, is that we asked our supply chain to recommend a new method of demolition. To which they presented something called a demolition curtain, and we'd only ever seen it be used. I saw online, we saw that it was used sort of in Germany, small scale version, sort of in the UK, or in London, a very small version, and it never been used on HS2. So as a so we were then looking at how we could integrate it into the actual project, into that package of works. And as a concept, it was brilliant. But, you know, to fully embrace it, I think you have to be really innovative to be able to evaluate all the different levels of how to really completely bring it to life. So we had to look at forms of complex temporary works requirements, the stakeholder interface with using it, providing community assurance that this technique, although, you know, it looked like it was a crane that held a huge curtain up against a building, and then we were sort of using a long reach arm to munch away at it. It was quite visually intrusive that way, but it was definitely, in the long run, it was a much safer, much quicker, more efficient way of doing demolition. So to be able to see that through from start to finish, I found really, really enjoyable. So I definitely think I'm on the innovator side of things, and I love working with a team to bring that to life.
Sounds good to me. It's so weird hearing demolition curtain together.
If you see it, it's literally that. So it just doesn't look as complicated as yeah, people might think anyway.
I'm definitely got to look that up after to see what that looks like. So can you, I know you mentioned some earlier stuff, but can you recall a moment where you thought, you know, wow, like, you know, you realize the stuff that you're doing regarding supporting women and the needs of women in engineering, where you felt the work I'm doing is really benefiting the women around me as well as myself?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's the I did touch on it earlier, is that sort of being a founding member of that women's network on the HS2 project. So it's called Female Advocates in Infrastructure and Rail, so it's FAIR for short.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, that's something that that's been it, and it's still running now. We sort of started it in 2018, and it's really great to see that it's still very successful on HS2. But essentially what happened was we found a gap on the joint venture project, that there wasn't really a community or a place for sort of the women to come together and sort of understand, you know, be able to see how we could support each other and how we could sort of drive the narrative of equality and gender fairness on the project itself. So we had the opportunity to do that with the support of our diversity and inclusion sort of team, which was brilliant. And I was a chair for that network at one point at the start. And as a steering group, we were able to sort of roll out role model programs, reverse two-way mentorship initiatives, and multiple events to raise awareness and actually drive that gender fairness agenda. And so that's really something that's been really beneficial for me, because it's been such a great community to be a part of, and it keeps you motivated, it keeps you sort of you're able to check in with people and make sure that you know, you feel everyone's fully supported, but also to know that it's still running now through the successes of the succeeding chairs and the steering group is, yeah, it's really nice to know that that's still there. It's still sort of sustainable, being there for the exactly, for the women on the project.
So how do you measure the success?
Yeah, so in terms of measuring success, I think it's not just about being able to show the diversity in a business through overarching ratios of representation. We need to delve a lot deeper and know that there's diversity sort of at all parts of the organization.
Yeah.
So it's getting that sort of doing surveys to understand where we stand as a whole, but also in terms of gathering data, we want to know how able people feel to share their ethnicity or sexual orientation, religion, without the fear of being used against them. Also, you know, how inclusive is a workplace in terms of the physical and the non-physical environment. So getting that information, if there's things in place that allow it to be, say, all inclusive. And I know that there are projects, especially on HS2, where they've actually got a benchmark list of, do you have XYZ to make sure that you are creating an inclusive working environment? And then, yeah, so that's really good, because then it can also be shared across the industry. And then there are also, you know, things as a business that you can do to ensure that the policies that you have support a diverse and inclusive workplace. And then you can measure on how well they're implemented on a project. And these policies are really important, because they can also help individuals to feel empowered and entitled to ask for what they need, and that their identity is recognized. So there are like many ways to measure that success. The big way obviously is to get the data, but also it's key that we've got the right metrics that we're also measuring too.
Exactly. Just like you mentioned, it's not always just the numbers side of it, is it, as well? You can look at the data and whatnot, but it doesn't counter a lot, include a lot of different things. But no, it's really good to get that aspect of things. It's good to hear that it's implemented into projects as well as its own specific thing, and it's not just something that's sort of wishy-washy or something that just appears in the air every now and again, which you do see happening sometimes, but it's actually embedded into a vital piece of the project to make sure it's a success itself.
Exactly, and you're able to then see how it how you're making improvements, or where you can make improvements. So it is vital.
It makes sense. Perfect. Thank you. I guess this kind of leads on to the next question, which you sort of answered, but I'll give you opportunity to develop on anything further if you want to. But I'd put here that, you know, we recognize there is a large percentage difference between the genders within the engineering sector. Although it's not great, it's something that we should all be aware of still. How do you drive the importance of equality in the engineering sector amongst colleagues? I know you've mentioned, you know, the groups that you're involved on and the volunteering, but is there any other things that you haven't mentioned?
So actually, I think in addition to sort of the employee networks, which, yeah, I am a huge advocate of, very clearly, but
Good.
good reason. But I think also creating an inclusive environment is not just down to sort of the marginalized groups. It is also the responsibility of every individual to step up and be an active ally.
Yeah.
So for that reason, Costain have actually rolled out an active allyship program. So it's a training in place to highlight what it takes to be an active ally, from sort of listening to a peer, understanding their concerns, calling out on discrimination, to also like continuously learning best practice to maintain that inclusive environment. So it is constantly an iterative process. And what's great about this program, which is open to everyone, it's just a form of training to give people the confidence to know how to, you know, support their peers and also their teams that they lead. Is, you know, it's hard sometimes to know when is the right time to say something, when's not, or what if I say something wrong and that can hold you back from saying anything at all. So yeah, we're very aware that everyone is learning all the time. So it's also understanding how to sort of both sides to also be, you know,
how to respond,
empathetic.
how to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. How to respond, how to approach the situation, and how to also help someone understand the best way forward. So I think that's really important in terms of driving equality in the industry.
Awesome. So obviously these things that you've just spoken about are all going to continue to grow. But is there any other plans that you've got in mind to drive change? And have you any other projects on the horizon?
Yeah, so I actually have a bit of a passion project that I'm working on sort of personally. Yeah. So as I mentioned, and very clearly, I'm a South Asian engineer. I'm of Indian heritage, and actually one of the things that has stuck out sort of for me is the low percentage of women from ethnic minority backgrounds that are engineers.
Yeah.
So sort of as a way to do our part in tackling this, I am working on something with 2 other South Asian engineers, and we're sort of developing a podcast that will showcase this community, so we can make that representation in the industry more visible for the younger generation. I think that's really, really important. Also, just not just for the younger generation, but for families and communities to understand and see the representation, but understand what engineering is and what it involves. Like I said, I had no influence of engineering in my family, and truly speaking, Arkwright sort of opened that, confidence in that, sort of also confidence in my family in going and taking the path that I have. But that's not going to be the case for everyone. So that's sort of the reason we want to create that platform and space. And we also want to include sort of conversations with our allies, because they're also doing amazing things in terms of inclusivity and inspiring the next generation. So yeah, it's going to be highlighting sort of those from ethnic minority backgrounds, but also, how can our allies also do the same in supporting diversity.
No, awesome. That sounds really, really good. Interesting. So when does hopefully the podcast sort of launch?
So it's been we've been working on it sort of since November last year, when I met them both at the London Build Expo. So we're hoping to launch it sort of this summer. So imminently, I suppose.
Yeah, that's not far.
Not far. Maybe I should go for autumn. No, we're going to stick to sort of summertime.
No, awesome. It sounds exciting. So to round off then, Era, do you have any other words of advice or wisdom for the younger female generation? And I think it would be good to add in there younger female generation of ethnic minority backgrounds who are considering engineering sector as a future career path.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me, I think because I had a passion in a subject, I've been able to take that through with me from the start, and I think that's sort of the baseline where I believe you'll always be successful if you have a starting point. When it's something that you're passionate about, it's the ultimate driver, I think, to keep motivated and learn more. So, if you love the idea of building or creating something, leaving a legacy, being part of a team, collaborative, creative, and it's not always, it doesn't have to be, it can be as technical as you want it to be, ultimately, when it boils down to it. So there are, have the confidence and faith in yourself that you will do well in it. And I think that hopefully you can speak to everyone, especially those who might feel, a little bit of pressure to go into other subjects for XYZ reason. If there is something that you really, really enjoy and you really love it, it's a really great starting point. Engineering is a multifaceted industry. There are so many options. So, speak to people about it, research it, and if it excites you, then yeah, go for it.
Awesome. What an excellent round off. No, that's awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add or discuss, Era?
I'm okay, actually.
No, all good. No, you've said quite a lot. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you've been putting into improving the awareness of ladies in the industry and what you do to help support the equality balance in the sector as well. It's clearly been noted. Like you say, you was one of the top 50 in women in engineering, which is an incredible achievement. So again, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. It's been great to hear your story, your advice, your future adventures. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, Ben. Thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.